Thank you for tuning in today to I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, online at retirementreformation.org. Did you know that when you retire, your calling doesn't retire? If you've got a pulse, you've got a purpose. Your calling is a lifetime calling. If you're still around, God's not done with you yet. As a retired person, you are a fully funded missionary for the rest of your life. Don't understand what that means? Maybe Bruce and I will talk about that today. You've tuned into I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation with Bruce Bruinsma, the founder of the Retirement Reformation, and I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. We invite you to check us out online, retirementreformation.org, and on Facebook, Retirement Reformation. Here's something I know for sure. No matter where you live in the United States, or frankly, anywhere on this planet, there are needs in your community for volunteers. So many needs. Having run a nonprofit for the last 12 years, I can attest to the fact that I can always use a little volunteer help. You know how you now have the most freedom in your life, and you have a lifetime of experiences and talents that you can share. Where are you investing your faith walk, your talents, your wisdom to make your city a better place to live? Today, Bruce and I are going to dig into this topic because it is critical to the health of your city and the health of our nation. Bruce, you've been an avid volunteer over the years. What are some of the places that you've invested your time, talent, and wisdom?
A couple things that are helpful. Matter of fact, a friend of mine gave me an insight the other day that is foundational to answering your question. It was that it is a passion that is built into you that gives you the energy to be able to take the steps that it needs to be a good volunteer or a good support or a good anything. But it is your calling that identifies where you are needed. And so the combination of passion, energy, and need, calling, unique for you, are the things that when they come together, you find meaning and purpose. So the places where I found, matter of fact, just recently I went to our men's group at church was doing a barbecue cook-off. And I don't normally go to those things, but I went.
So you had to suffer for the Lord and eat barbecue.
I had to suffer for the Lord. Well, it was indigestion is what I had to suffer. But at any rate, as I walked in, there was a guy, looked like maybe his early 60s, was sitting by himself at a table, and I didn't recognize him. And so I went over and sat down and said, "How you doing?" And so we ended up with a long conversation, and he was a point. We ended up having breakfast a couple of days ago. And so in the age group that I'm in, that idea of mentoring or being available to others to be able to share with whatever the circumstance, whether it's just a guy you meet at church or it's any one of a whole collection of others, where you can be a mentor to them is important. And mentoring what? Well, what it is that you know. And it could be mentoring about how to shovel snow. Could be mentoring about, as we said in our last segment, could be some mentoring about how to prepare meals. I find myself as a caregiver now preparing 3 meals a day. After a few months, you look for books like this.
Easy weeknight dinners.
Easy weeknight dinners. And you go, man, thank goodness I got that. Well, I'm sure that there are other people that I'm going to run into that I'm going to get a copy of this and give it to them. So what it is that God has prepared you for, the need that then shows up and you're being intentionally available to them, is all part of this process of blessing your city, blessing your neighbors. Go sit down with, I had another friend of mine that I was talking to, and he was complaining about how, he had some ideas for the city, but he can't ever get the mayor's attention. I said, well, there's 7 different city councilmen. Call their office and tell them you want to take them out for lunch. I said, talk to them about your idea. Talk to them about what the issues that they're doing with. And you can insert yourself by being available to be able to deliver what it is that you have experienced or what it is the value that you bring to the conversation.
Bruce, I want to draw attention to the manifesto, the Retirement Reformation Manifesto, which you can find online on our website, retirementreformation.org, and then click on the manifesto. Point number 4 says stewardship. We realize retirement may extend for 30 years or longer. Holy smokes. The reality of longevity demands that we see all retirement seasons as a resource to be appreciated, embraced, valued, and to faithfully steward. We're committed to healthy living. And then service. We live on mission for Jesus, representing him to others. God calls each of us to be on mission during every stage of life. An important role for those in retirement is to pass on wisdom learned and encourage the next generation. Coaching, mentoring, volunteering, and grandparenting are valuable opportunities available to us. 2 exact points for where you just talked about of things we can do with intentionality. Very, very, very powerful. It's so important that we recognize that we have, as chronologically superior people, we have resources. So, Bruce, what are some of the places in your community that need volunteers?
Well, if you start, instead of starting with the organization, start with the needs that are, and then see who is filling them. So whether we're talking about homelessness, or we're talking about foster parenting, or single parenting, or grandparent parenting, those are huge and growing needs that are often ignored. And so to be able to start with that, and then to be able to step into an area. A good friend of mine, his son was having some real serious problems with alcohol, and that's not unusual. But it just so happened that there's an organization called Hope is Alive. And Hope is Alive brings the recovery houses for 4 to 7 men or 4 to 7 women, and they're 6 month to a year programs. They're Christian based. And they just do they got a 70% ongoing recovery percentage, which is huge. Well, there's one example. Is Embrace Grace is another that we've talked about. But so identify the need and then say, what people, what organizations are helping in that area? And then you may find a need that nobody's helping.
Right.
And that, in fact, you can step in, like being a wraparound grandparent for foster kids and foster families in your church.
That was exactly what I was going to say. We have talked so much about that, and we will never stop talking about it. But if you got families that have adopted, families that have fostered, they need help. Wraparound grandparenting, there's enough room for lots of sets of grandparents and a family like that, because adopting is hard, fostering is hard. Frankly, just having your own children and raising them is hard, and especially when they're not near their grandparents. So that's a great idea.
If I can just give some specific suggestion there for someone who's listening, or maybe multiple people who are listening will respond to this. But take the initiative in your church to identify where the foster families are, where the adoptive families are, then put together or suggest that a group of seniors come together of different ages as seniors with different skill sets and different abilities, and you come together in groups of 7 or 8 and bring them together, and then introduce them to those foster parents, and as a team be available to them across the needs that they have, whether it be giving them some respite, or one of the kids needs help with math, or they've got 2 or 3 kids and they can't go to all the ball games, or they just simply need prayer. But be a leader to put together a group of seniors to be a support rather than just an individual. That will be so meaningful. And man, if you do that and then replicate that, there's a ministry need and opportunity that exists across our country in every single church that exists.
I want to bring up, just before we close out this segment, some lists of places and communities that always need volunteers. Schools. You already mentioned schools in our previous podcast. Schools are always looking for volunteers, people to read, people to have kids read too. Food banks. They're always looking for volunteers for food banks. Thrift stores. they often don't want to pay people so they can make the money off the thrift in order to support whatever ministry they're supporting with the thrift stores. Local chambers of commerce, if you're a business people, retired business person, local chambers are always looking for mentors and people to lead activities and to pour into other people. Your local church always is looking for volunteers for all kinds of things. Community centers, if you're so lucky to be in a community that has a community center, they're always looking for somebody to check people in and check people out. Local businesses, maybe they just they could use some help, but they can't afford to pay for it. And you could volunteer. Or maybe they can afford to pay for it, but not what you used to make. But you could pour your life into a local business. Fire departments and police departments. I joined the fire department at 58 years old. There's people that they need volunteers, and I'm certainly capable of doing 90% of what those young kids do. Police departments, they're always looking for volunteers, filling out reports, doing community service monitoring, that kind of stuff. Hospitals, greeters at the hospitals, just people who go in and say hello to people in the rooms. Pregnancy centers. Man, there's a desperate need for more women to help in pregnancy centers. Not so much men, but pregnancy centers. Halfway houses for men and women. And prisons and jails. The local county jail, city jail, and prisons, they're always looking for volunteers. That's a big, long list. But if you're looking for somewhere to plug in your life, there's somewhere locally that could use your gifts, talents, and abilities. We're going to come right back with the final segment of our interview with Amy Ford from Embrace Grace, online at embracegrace.org. And we'll finish up talking about neighboring after we talk to Amy. We'll be right back with more on I Retire for Him.
Recreating Retirement is an interactive small group study helping you to move from nothing to what's next. You can join us on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. East Coast time on Facebook Live. Our goal for this study is to provide a group setting for interaction and new ideas while leading you through a first step in your journey from retirement to reformation. Here's the big idea. During the next 5 years, 5,000 small groups will experience this journey of discovery in churches and faith-based organizations across the country. Is your church a place where recreating retirement needs to be planted? Join us online to experience the study or prepare to lead a small group at your church or ministry. Email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org or go to our website at retirementreformation.org. That's retirementreformation.org.
Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him. As we promised you on the last podcast, Amy Ford is back with us today to share a little bit more of her story and a little bit more of the story of Embrace Grace. Online at embracegrace.com, embracegrace.com. Amy, Bruce, and I were talking a little offline and said, boy, we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how do we I want to say this. How do we get the local body of Christ, which we call the church, but we're talking about within the four walls and outside the four walls, how do we get them to recognize this huge ministry opportunity and to not associate guilt and shame with it, but to celebrate the life that is growing inside of another human being? How do we get the church to have a different attitude about this?
Well, I had one time a woman came up to me and she was like, I'm struggling. You do this Embrace Grace thing and you're throwing baby showers for women with unexpected pregnancies, but maybe they deserve gently used stuff and not brand new. Like they did do some things and make some decisions to get themselves in the situation that they're in. And God just immediately downloaded the prodigal son story. And I was like, have you ever thought about how the prodigal son, he had spent all his dad's money, he'd wasted it all away, and he was literally eating the leftovers of the pigs. And he said, I could go back home and I could eat the leftovers of my dad's servants. That's a little better than the pigs' leftovers. And my whole favorite part of the story is it says, and while he was a long way off, the father ran to him and he had his servants put a robe on his back and a ring on his finger. And he said, son, I'm so glad that you're home. You were lost and now you're found. And he said, let's kill the fatted calf and let's have a big party. He didn't say, let's get the leftovers from yesterday. You really messed up. He said, let's have a feast. And then a lot of times as the church, we can be like the brother. Well, the brother was like, well, that's not fair. You're going to throw him a party after what he did. Like, he doesn't deserve that. I've done everything. I've been basically the perfect son, and the father said, son, you have everything that you need in me. So let's go and celebrate that your brother was lost and now he's found. And I've seen at these baby showers that are happening at churches all over the nation. And anybody that's listening, if you look up embracegrace.com, you can put in your zip code and find a church near you that has Embrace Grace group, buy gifts, ask them when their next baby shower is. They usually do 2 a year. But I've seen where the baby shower, that act of love is so overwhelming to the moms. It is true what scripture says, that it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. They are so blown away that people at the church went and bought gifts and their favorite colors and their baby, for their baby, these special, unique, even monogram things that they're like, you did that for me. Like, they can't believe it. I remember one girl one time, she missed a lot of classes and we kind of struggled. They're like, does she still get the baby shower? Because that's the whole thing. You go through the classes and at the end it's a baby shower, but she missed a lot, different reasons. And we're like, yes, she should be a part. It is Embrace Grace. So yes, we're going to throw her a baby shower. But when she walked in, she saw this table and it was, it's all about baby showers for a lot of moms all at the same time. But it was a table full of gifts and she saw it and she said, who am I sharing a table with? And we're like, you're not sharing a table with anyone. All of these gifts are for you and your baby. And she put her hand over her mouth and just tears going down her face. And she said, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. She kept saying it over and over again. And that's the thing about grace. Like, none of us deserve God's grace and his goodness and his kindness and his mercy, but yet he lavishes us with it anyways. And that we can be, as the believers, a part of throwing the parties and partnering with heaven to do that, to draw them one step closer to the heart of God. And I've seen so many times that sometimes when God wants to woo his daughter or his son back to his heart, he might just give him a baby to do it. And he might just give him the sweetest face that they've ever laid eyes on, so that maybe they can get a tiny glimpse of how much God must love them. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. And by walking alongside and planting seeds of love with these moms and their dad, you are watching some bloom faster than others, but you are watching a transformation happen where they're just getting closer and closer to the heart of Jesus. And they're experiencing God's love that they've never experienced before. And it's just beautiful. And it doesn't matter your age. I remember one time we had a leader came up to us. She had just started a new group. And she said, I have a lady that wants to help me lead, but she's kind of older. She's got a cane. She said, I'm kind of struggling. Like, are the girls going to relate with her? And she said, but I prayed about it. And I felt the Lord said, yes, this lady is supposed to co-lead with you. And so I said, okay, you can co-lead. So she's telling me about her whole semester. But she said this lady really bonded with one of the women in our group. And it was one of the first new moms. She had her baby, and that new mom ended up naming her baby after that older leader. And she said that mom never had a grandma. She never had any kind of even a mom figure. And they just bonded in a way that, like, she named her baby after her. And like, it doesn't matter age. We've had even kids, like we have a leader that has a daughter that is 9 years old. And the leader was one day babysitting at her house, an Embrace Grace baby. So this Embrace Grace mom had Ubered over, dropped off the baby, got back in the Uber and went to work. And so the little 9-year-old daughter of the leader said, Mom, why doesn't that mom have a car? And she said, well, she can't afford it. And that's why we're helping watch her baby so she can go to work and save her money so she can get a car. And she said, well, why can't we just buy her car? And the leader's like, we can't afford to buy her car. I wish we could, but we can't. She said, well, what if I baked cupcakes and I saved money and we bought her car? And she said, well, if you want to try, you can. So this little 9-year-old started baking cupcakes and telling people like, hey, I am selling cupcakes. I'm trying to buy a car for a single mom. And people, when they heard about it, they're like, here's $500 for a dozen. That's just precious. How amazing is that? And just in a couple of months, this little girl had raised enough to buy a gently used Ford Explorer. And she handed the keys over to this single mom in the church parking lot. And what's so cool is people started hearing about it. So an auto mechanic in the neighborhood was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'll cover her oil changes for the next 3 or 4 years. Someone was like, I cover her insurance for the next 3 or 4 years. Someone's like, I got her gas cards for the next 3 or 4 years. People, it was the church. It's not a building, it's a people, like you were just saying. And all of us, it's like, what gifts and talents has God put inside of us? And it's not just so we can use it for a job. It is to do the good works that God called us to do. And that may or may not be involved with our job, but that's why he put him inside of us. So just because someone's retired doesn't mean you put those strengths and gifts on a shelf. No, let's use them for the kingdom. How can we use, and I know that's your passion too. Like that probably doesn't even feel like work when you're tapping into that thing that brings you life that God made you for. It doesn't even feel like work. It's joy. And getting involved in the pro-life movement, there's so many opportunities that we can use your specific strengths, whether it's financial, helping a mom. They don't know how to do, a lot of them don't know how to do credit. Like they'll do a tote the note car and get in over their head. They need some financial wisdom. If you're in finances and really good at that, maybe you did HR, you want to help her with a resume and like pick out a cute outfit and get her ready for looking for a great job. Maybe it is babysitting, or maybe it could be, it's unlimited how your gifts and talents can be used in the kingdom, and that there's so many opportunities in the pro-life movement that you can get engaged in.
Bruce, last
Amy
question.
Ford, what a wonderful message. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Know that God calls us to be fruitful, and the things that you have described are all part of fruit bearing. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Thanks.
And we'll look forward to having you back again. Jim?
Yes.
Yeah, Amy, as you summarize that great story, that 9-year-old, I want to meet that 9-year-old who's probably 15 now, but whatever.
11. I think.
11.
Just
That's incredible. Maybe we could get her to run for president in about 24 years. That'd be great. What is the biggest, when you look at the local church that has adopted Embrace Grace inside, what is the biggest need they have with that program within their local church that our audience, that retiree who wants purpose in their life, can fulfill? 1 minute to answer that question, we got to go.
Well, definitely it goes back to just discipleship. They crave, and really mentorship, guidance, someone taking them by the hand, leading Embrace Legacy. If you're a man, you can lead and walk alongside them, speaking life. And when you create that relationship, you're finding out things about them that's like, oh my gosh, this guy's got dad wounds. Like, let me speak life and give him scriptures and encourage him in that way. Or maybe someone's got mom wounds, whatever it might be. It's all developed through relationship. So just even if it's one person that you're taking under your wing that you can speak life into, will make the hugest difference in the world. And there's so many ways. Check out embracegrace.com. Find a group near you, start a group. There are ways you can do that, and it's desperately needed in the church for sure, whether it's through Embrace Grace or through your own thing. It's so needed.
So is Embrace Legacy, embracelegacy.com for the guys?
Yeah, we have that, and you can get to it through embracegrace.com too. But yeah, that's all the information about for the guys to lead a dad's group.
Fantastic. Amy Ford with embracegrace.com. Thanks for being on I Retire For Him today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with more on I Retire For Him.
Our work on this earth doesn't end when the paycheck stops. God calls us to be faithful for a lifetime. Whether you're looking forward to retirement or you're already there, our all-small group study, Recreating Retirement, will help you understand, engage, and activate what God has for you in this fourth quarter of life. Join Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma as you consider your past, strengths, spiritual gifts, and your passions, and how they all come together as the call God has for you in these years. Connect with us on our online community group at facebook.com/Retirement Reformation, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, or if you'd like to bring Recreating Retirement to your church, email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org. Are you ready to start your life-changing journey today?
Hey, welcome back to I Retire For Him. Great conversation with Amy Ford. Bruce, phenomenal organization. I know she was a connection that you had made, Embrace Grace. Why don't you just make a comment about Embrace Grace and why you're so passionate about their mission?
You know, every time that that God puts me in connection with someone whose passion has been given hands and feet and is making differences in a group, with a group of people, my heart just goes out for them, because that's the representation of what God asked us, what Jesus asked us to do when he talked about love your neighbor. And so with Embrace Grace, Amy is her story is so inspiring, and the way that they touch the lives of women and then challenge women to make the difference in the lives of others. Just great. It's like Hope is Alive does with men, Embrace Grace does with women, and the need is just absolutely huge. And so one of the principles that we can take away from these conversations is that, where is there a need? So I'll give you an example I was thinking about. If you just ask yourself, who do I know, or what category of person do I know who is lonely? We all can think of a variety of individuals and characters. People that you see at church, but you wonder, do they have anybody else to talk to at all during the week? So who's lonely, and how can you be a part of the solution in their life to just sit and talk or listen to music or bring a meal or whatever it may be? But just asking you the question, who is lonely? Who is struggling with addiction? Who is struggling with family issues? And as you ask those questions and then prepare and then step into those, you'll be surprised often at how God has uniquely prepared you to be able to make a difference in somebody else's life.
Bruce, we're talking about investing in our community and some ways we can invest in the community. I think the question is, does the Bible really call us to invest into our community? Is this a scriptural thing?
Well, the being a blessing to your community is intrinsic. Matter of fact, as you read, we're pretty early in the year, so for those of us that are reading through the Bible one more time, when you look at the commands that God gave the Israelites and what it is they are to do, so many of them involve blessing the community, not just blessing how yourself was supposed to be blessed, but the blessing of the community for the good of the community. And so to be able to take that as a model, and then when Jesus, he didn't say, just take care of yourself. He said, love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And another way to think about neighbor is, in fact, our community. So a good number of years ago, folks came to me and I agreed to run for the school board of the city where we were living in. And that wasn't really something that I had thought a lot about, but I have a passion for education and learning, so decided to do it. On the day of the election, you never know how God's going to guide these things. On the day of the election, when they counted the votes, I lost by 7 votes. So Judy and I took off for a day or so and went over to the beach, and we're just going to chill out for a couple of days. And I get a phone call the next morning from a friend of mine, says, you better get back here. I said, why is that? He says, they found some absentee ballots and it looks like you won by 1. So, oh, you're kidding. So we charged back, and sure enough, after a recount, I won by 1 vote. And so, as we are led, and that changed my life for 4 years.
I bet it did. It made it all pleasantry, right? It was all pleasant.
Yeah, well, I wish it were, but it was all meaningful and was all valuable, and it was making a contribution to the community. And so, whether it be willing to put yourself out for that kind of activity, or addressing all the other needs that totally exist. Blessing the community is one of the roles of the church. Matter of fact, I'll just make this observation. I think one of the places where the church is derelict today is that it is not being a blessing, therefore it's not appreciated. And so we need to make some changes within the church, and that's us, to be able to reach out into the community, not just worry about ourselves, but what's next and what can we do so that, in fact, we couldn't, the reason that churches have a tax deductibility and don't pay taxes on their properties is because of the value that they bring to the community. Well, if you're not bringing value to the community, at some point that's going to go away. So for practical reasons, but then Jesus-directed reasons of love your neighbor, making a contribution to your community is, as Christians, one of the things that we need to be known for.
Right before the break at the end of the first segment, I listed out a huge list of places that desperately need volunteers all the time. I'm going to say them again. Schools, food banks, thrift stores, local chambers of commerce, church, community centers, local businesses, fire departments, police departments, hospitals, pregnancy centers, halfway houses, prisons, and jails. But I think the question we need to ask is, how do you figure out where's the best place to volunteer? And I think it's, you got to match your talents with your interests. What do you like? Because you're volunteering.
Or what are you passionate about?
Right, your passions. Right. What are you passionate about?
What makes you? A friend of mine asked me the other day. He says, "Well, how do you define passion?" I said, "Well, just tell me what makes you cry,
Or what makes you angry,
or what makes you deliriously happy."
Okay, glass half full, glass half empty. Because sometimes you see a problem that makes you angry, and you're like, I want to help fix that. That's what I mean by that. Not anger,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
but I think sometimes we get stuck though, Bruce, and it's good. We need to ask our friends. Well, where do you think I'd be best to serve? Because our friends sometimes see us, and our spouses definitely see us better than we do. They know us better than us.
Yeah, you talked about it. When we talk about our neighbors and asking them over for dinner, ask your 3 closest friends over for dinner, and then pose that question. Say, I'm struggling a little bit. I'm looking for places where, in fact, I think I can be used and I can find meaning, and that I can make a difference. Help me. And you'll be surprised at the suggestions that they'll come, or the directions that they'll point you, that will then give you a pathway to go. And also, it's this whole idea of serving and finding meaning and purpose, and being a blessing. It's iterative and it's progressive. You need to just take the next step, and then be open to the next step.
Right.
And be open to the next step. But you've got to take the first step. And there are so many people say, well, I don't know what that's all going to mean. Well, of course you don't, because you haven't taken the first step. And so being encouraged by us today, whatever that is that God's put on your heart or put in front of you, go ahead and take that next step.
And I suggest that you decide ahead of time about how much time you're willing to volunteer during any given week, and maybe what days you'd like to volunteer. And put parameters around it, guardrails around it, so that it doesn't take over your life, because you still are retired and there's some other things you want to do. And I would challenge you to find something you can do and volunteer with where your spouse can walk alongside you, because that's why you got married anyway 50 years ago, to spend time with your best friend. Why not find something in retirement you can do together and get some perspective? What do you think about that?
I think that's a key reminder. And so, most of our marriages after a long time need some additional work. And so being able to find those things that you can do together to remind yourself why, when I first saw Judy walking down the aisle of this little church in Columbus, Ohio, and I went, oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Hi, my name's Bruce. Well, that kind of to get that regenerated within a context of 50 years of marriage, or 60 years of marriage, or 40 years of marriage.
You missed an opportunity there to give a plug for the Ohio State going into the championship game, Bruce.
Boy, it's so fun with your spouse to be able to jump up and down at age 62, sit on the edge of your chair, and see your team finally make it to the national championship again, with all the stories and what you know about the people and the Christ walk of those players from Ohio State. It is amazing.
And we're recording this show before the game, even though it gets released after the game, so we don't know the outcome yet. But either way, getting to a national championship is a big deal. Bruce, great conversation about neighboring. I think it's all so important that we remember all the time that God put us where we live on purpose, because our neighbors desperately need to meet Jesus, and we may be the only Jesus our neighbors ever meet. Bruce, thanks for letting us have this conversation today.
Jim, thanks for suggesting the topics, and then the ways we always interact, and then the guests that we have. So we would ask our listeners, please tell a friend. Check out this podcast. Occasionally, these guys have a couple of things that are worthwhile. And so we would appreciate your help and support in that way.
Thank you, Bruce. You can check us out online, retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. You've been listening to I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation with your host, Jim Brangenberg, and Retirement Reformation's founder, Bruce Bruinsma. We're Christ followers journeying from retirement to reformation, so at the end we can ultimately say, I retire for Him.
I retire for Him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg, and Retirement Reformation founder, Bruce Bruinsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money, and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.